There are moments on live television that no producer plans for. Not the big scores, not the record-breaking rounds. The moments that happen when the cameras are rolling and a real human being does something so unscripted, so honest, so completely unrehearsed that everyone in the room, the audience, the crew, the host, stops performing and starts feeling. This was one of those moments. Earl Davenport, 74 years old, retired Army sergeant, widower, farmer from Hazlehurst, Georgia, was standing up from the podium. Not to answer a question, not to celebrate a correct response. He was standing up to leave. His family was watching him. The audience was watching him. Steve Harvey was watching him. And Earl Davenport, a man who had served 2 tours in Vietnam and worked 600 acres of Georgia farmland for 50 years, was walking away from that stage with his jaw set and his eyes fixed straight ahead, the way a proud man walks when he is too proud to let anyone see how much he is hurting. He had made it 3 steps toward the edge of the stage. That's when his granddaughter Lily turned to face the podium. Steve Harvey had just read the next question, and Lily gave her answer, one answer, 2 words, in a voice so clear and so certain that it crossed that studio floor like something physical. Earl Davenport's footsteps stopped. He stood with his back to the stage for a long moment. His shoulders were up around his ears. His hands were at his sides. Then, slowly, he turned around. What happened next would not be about the game anymore. It would be about something far older and far more important. What it means to tell a man who believes his best days are behind him that to someone who loves him, he is still the whole world. To understand why Earl Davenport tried to walk off that stage, you have to understand who Earl Davenport was before grief got hold of him. He was born in 1951 in Hazlehurst, Georgia, Coffee County, a stretch of South Georgia farmland where the summers were brutal and the pines ran as far as the eye could see. His father grew tobacco and corn. His grandfather had cleared the original land with his own hands. The Davenport farm was not a business to them. It was a covenant, a piece of earth that had been passed down through hard work and stubbornness, and the refusal to quit when quitting would have been easier. Earl enlisted in the Army at 18. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, came home in 1972 with a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a silence he carried for the rest of his life. He never talked about what he saw over there. Not to his children, not to his buddies at the VFW hall, not even to Mary, who was the person he told everything else to. Mary, he had met her in the spring of 1973, less than a year after he came home. She was working the register at the hardware store in town. Earl came in to buy fence wire and left with her phone number, and something he hadn't felt in years. The sense that life might still be going somewhere worth going. They got married that October. They had 3 children. They built their life on that Georgia farm the same way Earl's father and grandfather had built theirs. Through early mornings, hard work, long summers, and the kind of steady love that doesn't announce itself, but holds everything else up. For 47 years, Mary was the center of everything. She was the one who remembered every birthday, who kept the house smelling like something good, who stayed up with the grandchildren when they were sick, and sent them home with jars of her fig preserves, and enough love packed into a hug to last them the whole drive back. She was the one who could talk Earl down when his pride got ahead of him, who knew how to reach him when the silence from Vietnam got loud again in his head. She was, in every way that mattered, the reason the farm felt like a home, rather than just a piece of land. She died 3 years ago, quietly the way she had lived. No fuss, no drama. Just a Tuesday morning when she went to sleep in the chair on the porch and didn't wake up. The doctor said her heart had simply given out. Earl said nothing. He sat on the porch with her for a long time before he called anyone. After the funeral, something in Earl Davenport started going out like a light. He still got up early, still walked the fields, still kept the farm running with the same mechanical discipline he had used his whole life. But the energy behind it, the sense of purpose, the sense that things mattered, had gone somewhere he couldn't find it. He stopped going to church, stopped going to the VFW, stopped answering the phone half the time, which scared his children more than anything else because Earl Davenport had never in his life been a man who didn't pick up the phone. He told them he was fine. He said it with such certainty, with such practiced calm that it almost worked. Almost. The one person it never worked on was his granddaughter Lily. Lily was 19. Earl's youngest child's oldest daughter. She had grown up spending every summer on the Davenport farm. She had learned to drive the tractor on those fields, had helped Earl fix fence lines and pick corn and patch the barn roof. She had sat on that porch with her grandmother drinking sweet tea while Earl worked, listening to Mary's stories about the early years, about who Earl had been before the quiet settled in him. Lily had her grandfather's stubbornness and her grandmother's ability to see through it. After Mary died, Lily was the one who kept showing up. Not every week. She was at college in Savannah, 3 hours away. But she called every Tuesday, which had been the day Mary died, because she knew Tuesday was the hardest. She came home for school breaks not just to see her parents, but to sit on that porch with Earl and make sure he knew he wasn't invisible. And slowly, quietly, she had watched him shrinking. Not in body, Earl was still a big, straight-backed man, broad in the shoulders the way farmers get after decades of real work. But in spirit, in reach, in the sense that he believed he still had something left to offer the people he loved. That was the thing that worried Lily the most. Not the silence, not the missing church, the way her grandfather had started to talk about himself in the past tense, the way he'd say "I used to," when there was no reason the thing he was describing had to be past tense at all. So 6 months ago, Lily had done something without telling anyone in the family. She had filled out a Family Feud application. She had submitted it with their families' names: Earl, herself, her father James, her Aunt Renee, and her cousin Darius, and written in the notes section that this was a surprise for her grandfather, that he had watched Family Feud almost every evening for 30 years, that he knew the answers better than the contestants did, and that she was trying to give him a reason to have a good day. The producers called her back in 3 weeks. She told the family it was a day trip to Atlanta for a school project. She told Earl they were going to lunch. When the limousine pulled up to the studio entrance in Atlanta, and a production assistant came out with the family's name cards and warm-up instructions, Earl Davenport turned to look at his granddaughter with the slow, measured expression of a man who has survived 2 wars and 5 decades of farm life, and recognizes when he's been outmaneuvered. Lily looked back at him without blinking. "You knew every answer, Grandpa," she said. "Every episode. For 30 years. Now you get to prove it." Earl looked at the studio, looked at James and Renee and Darius, who were trying very hard not to grin, looked back at Lily. He said nothing, but he walked through the door. The studio was bigger than it looked on television. Louder and brighter and faster moving than a man used to 600 acres of quiet Georgia pine country was prepared for. Earl walked in like he was doing reconnaissance, taking stock of the room, measuring its dimensions, deciding where he stood in relation to everything else. Steve Harvey came out to the family area to meet them before the taping. He shook Earl's hand with both of his, the way you shake the hand of someone you mean to show respect to, and Earl, who had been preparing to be handled, relaxed 1 degree. "Vietnam?" Steve said, nodding at the purple heart pin Earl had worn on his jacket lapel since 1973. "2 tours, Earl said. Steve Harvey looked at him for a moment. "Then you've already done the hardest thing you'll ever do. This is just television." He smiled. "And it pays better." Earl almost laughed. Almost. The Davenport family was matched against the Hendersons, a big, lively family from Charlotte, North Carolina, who had clearly done this before, or at least practiced it well enough that it looked that way. Fast buzzers. Confident answers. The kind of family that was comfortable being watched. Earl was not comfortable being watched. He played carefully at first, the way he did everything, measuring before he moved, calculating odds before he committed. Lily and Darius handled the speed rounds. James controlled the main podium early. Earl stood in the lineup and tracked the game the way he used to track a field before harvest, looking for patterns, identifying openings. And then came his first answer. The category was things you find in a garage. Steve read it, and Earl buzzed in before James could move his hand. "Tools," Earl said. "Number 2 answer. 38 points. He didn't smile, but the set of his shoulders changed by maybe 2 degrees, and Lily, standing one place to his right, felt it. The family was in the game, back and forth with the Hendersons. The main game came down to the final round. The Davenports had control of the board but needed one more answer to win the pile. Steve read the category. Name a chore that your father taught you that you still do the same way today. James buzzed in. He got the number 3 answer, mowing the lawn, 22 points. It wasn't enough. The Hendersons could steal. They guessed. They were wrong. The Davenports got the board. Steve turned to Earl. "You've got the deciding answer, sir." Steve said, "What's a chore your father taught you that you still do the same way today?" Earl thought about his father, about the South Georgia sun, about the smell of tilled earth in early spring. He thought about 100 mornings watching his father's hands and learning how to use his own. He said, "Planting." A beat. The board lit up. Number 1 answer, 61 points. The Davenports won the main game. The studio erupted. Lily threw her arms around her grandfather's neck, and for a moment, just a moment, Earl held on. His big, rough hands pressed against her back. He closed his eyes. James and Renee and Darius were celebrating. Lily was laughing. And Earl, standing in the middle of it, looked like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to win something and was trying to remember if he was allowed to feel good about it. They moved to fast money. Lily went first. She was quick and confident. Growing up watching this show every summer with Earl had left her with a mental archive of common answers. And she moved through her 5 questions with focused speed. When she came back out, her scores were added up, 164 points. 36 points needed from Earl. Steve walked over to him with the kind of calm encouragement he had spent a decade perfecting. "You've got this, sir," he said quietly. "You already won the game. This is just extra." Earl stepped up to the podium. The first 2 questions were fine. Earl answered them with the same deliberate certainty he applied to everything. 16 points on the first, 12 on the second, 28 points, 8 more to go. Then Steve read the 3rd question. "Name something a grandfather passes down to his grandchildren." Earl opened his mouth, and nothing came. Not because he didn't know the answer. He knew the answer. He knew a dozen answers. But in that half-second of silence, something else came flooding in instead. Mary's voice, the farm, the sound of the land in summer, the sense that everything he had meant to pass down had already been gathered up and carried away the night she didn't wake up in the porch chair. Who was he passing anything down to now? What was left of him that was worth giving? The buzzer sounded. No answer registered. Steve moved to the 4th question. Earl got it, 14 points, and that, combined with what they had, was enough. Technically, the family had won. But Earl had heard the buzzer. He had stood at that podium and come up empty, and to a man who had prided himself for 74 years on never coming up empty. The buzzer sounded like a verdict. He looked at his family celebrating. He looked at Lily, her face open and bright, clapping with everything she had. He looked at the audience. He looked at the cameras, and something in him decided it quietly, the way he made every decision. "I'm done. I've held them back enough." He placed both hands flat on the podium. He pushed himself upright. He said, low enough that only Lily heard it, "Go on and celebrate. I'm going to get some air." And Earl Davenport turned and started walking toward the edge of the stage. Lily's face changed. In a second, the brightness went out of it, and something much older and much more urgent took its place. She had seen this before, not on a stage, at the farm, on the porch, in the kitchen. The moment when her grandfather decided he had taken up enough space and started making himself smaller. She turned to face Steve Harvey. Steve had seen it too. He had seen Earl walking and made the call in an instant. He raised a hand to the production booth, slowing the transition. He looked at Lily. He read the next question. "Name the person who made you who you are today." The question was from the Fast Money set, unplanned for this moment, pulled from the standard bank of prompts. It was not a specially chosen question. It was not arranged by producers. It was simply the next one on the card. And Lily answered it without a pause. She turned toward the walking figure of her grandfather and said 2 words into the microphone. Clear and certain, and louder than anything else in that studio. "My grandfather." Earl Davenport's footsteps stopped. He was 3 steps from the stage wing. His back was to the cameras. His hands were at his sides. The studio had gone completely quiet. Not the performing kind of quiet, not the dramatic pause before a reveal. The real kind. The kind that happens when 200 people understand simultaneously that they are watching something private. Steve Harvey did not move. He looked at Lily and gave her a single nod that said, "Keep going." Lily kept going. "My grandfather built everything I know," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She pressed them flat against the podium. "He built the farm. He built the family. He taught me how to fix a fence line, and how to read the sky before a storm, and how to tell the difference between a plant that's struggling and one that's just going through a hard season." She paused. "He taught me that second one when I was 14, and going through something I didn't know how to name yet. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just showed me how to look at something that looks like it's dying and see what's still growing underneath." In the wing, Earl hadn't moved. "After my grandmother died," Lily said, "I watched him decide he was done. Not in a way he said out loud. Grandpa doesn't say things like that out loud, but I could see it. The way he stopped calling, stopped coming to things. The way he talked about himself like he was already in the past tense." Her voice tightened but held, "And I didn't know how to reach him. I didn't know how to make him understand that to me, to all of us, he is not past tense. He is right now. He is still the most important person in the room." She looked toward the stage wing. "I applied to this show because I needed him to have a good day. Because I needed him to stand somewhere under the lights and feel like he was still here. Not was. Is," she exhaled. "That's the person who made me who I am. My grandfather, Earl Davenport, who is standing over there right now, because he gave a wrong answer in a game show and thought that made him a burden." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, just slightly, and then steadied. "He has never been a burden to me. Not for one single day of my life." The silence in that studio was complete. And then, slowly, Earl Davenport turned around. He stood at the edge of the stage with his hands at his sides and his face doing something it almost never did in public, showing exactly what was happening inside it. His jaw was working. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the studio lighting. He was looking at his granddaughter the way you look at someone when they have said the thing you didn't know you needed to hear so badly, that hearing it almost takes your legs out from under you. Steve Harvey had been on this stage for many years. He had heard confessions and revelations and declarations of love of all kinds. He had watched families break down and build up and reach across every kind of divide. But he stood still in that moment and let it be what it was, because the thing unfolding in front of him did not need a host. It just needed space. Lily stepped down from the Fast Money platform. She walked across the stage toward her grandfather. She stopped in front of him. She was not as tall as he was. Earl was a big man, 6 feet and then some, built broad by decades of real labor. But she looked up at him without tilting her head back, the way people look at someone they are not intimidated by, the way she had looked at him her whole life. "You're not done," she said. "You don't get to decide that." Earl opened his mouth, closed it, tried again, and when the words came, they came out rough and slow and absolutely real. "I don't know what I have left," he said. "Your grandmother, she was the part of me that knew." Lily didn't look away from him. "She told me," Lily said. "The summer before she died. She sat with me on the porch and she told me everything she knew about you. Everything she wanted me to know in case she wasn't around to tell me herself." She reached out and put one hand on his arm. She said, "The part of your grandfather that matters most isn't the farm or the service or the strength. It's the part that shows up. Even when showing up is hard. Make sure he keeps showing up." The sound in that studio was not applause. It was something quieter and more total than applause. The sound of 200 people exhaling at the same time. Earl Davenport's face broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just a slow, private dissolving of the composure he had been holding together for 3 years. He pressed one hand over his eyes. His shoulders rose and fell once, heavily, and then Lily put her arms around him, and Earl put his arms around her, and they stood like that at the edge of that stage, while the audience came slowly, fully to its feet. Steve Harvey walked toward them. He waited. He did not speak until he felt the moment had been given enough time to be itself. Then he said, "Quietly, sir. I need you to walk back over here with me for a second." Earl lifted his head. He looked at Steve. "I've had a lot of people on this stage," Steve said. "Families who won money, and families who didn't. Families who came here for the game, and families who came here for something else entirely." He looked at Lily. "This young lady came here for you. She submitted that application and she drove you 4 hours, and she stood at this podium because she needed you to know something she didn't know how to say at the kitchen table. He looked back at Earl. Did you hear what she said? I heard it, Earl said. His voice was low. Rough. Then I need you to hear the rest of it. Steve looked straight at him. You buzzed in and got the opening answer. You won the board with one word. You've got a granddaughter who knows your voice in a crowd and turns toward you the way a plant turns toward the sun. He paused. That is not a man who is done. That is a man who forgot, for a minute, that he still matters. Earl said nothing, but he walked back to the center of that stage. The audience, already on its feet, got louder. Steve turned to face the cameras. I want to say something directly to everyone watching at home. There are people in your life right now, fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, who are walking toward the edge of the stage, who have decided, quietly, without telling anyone, that they've given everything they had to give, and it's time to make themselves smaller. They are not going to say it out loud. They are too proud for that. But you will know it by the way they talk about themselves in the past tense, by the way they stop picking up the phone. He let that sit for a moment. Don't wait for a television show to tell them what they need to hear. Tell them now. Today, before they take that third step. The episode aired on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, the clip of Lily Davenport walking across that stage to her grandfather had been watched 9 million times. By Sunday, it was 17 million. The comments were not what the internet usually produces. They were handwritten in the way people only write when something has reached somewhere past the clever and the performative, past the part of us that performs online, and landed somewhere genuine. People wrote about their own grandfathers, about the men in their families who had quietly started disappearing, about the moments they had missed, and the moments they still had time to take. A man in Tennessee wrote, I drove to my dad's house tonight after watching this. First time I've been there in 4 months. We sat on the porch for 2 hours. I'm going back next weekend. A woman in Michigan wrote, my grandfather stopped coming to family dinners 2 years ago. We thought he was just tired. We didn't ask why. I called him tonight. He cried. I cried. I don't know how we let so much time go. A social worker in Alabama shared the clip with every family she worked with that week. She said in her post, this is what abandonment looks like when it comes from the inside, when a person decides they've already taken up too much space. Watch for it. The clip was shared in veteran support communities across the country. The American Legion posted it. The VFW posted it. Dozens of VA hospitals and counseling centers used it in the weeks that followed as a conversation starter about withdrawal and isolation in elderly veterans. The quiet kind of disappearing that doesn't look like a crisis until it is one. Earl Davenport, retired Army sergeant from Hazlehurst, Georgia, became the face of something nobody had planned for him to represent. He did not particularly enjoy that. I'm not a symbol, he told a reporter from the Savannah paper who drove out to the farm. I'm a farmer who had a bad minute on television. The reporter asked him what Lily had said to him afterward, after the cameras, after the drive home. Earl was quiet for a moment. He was sitting on the porch where Mary used to sit. His hands were on his knees. She said her grandmother gave her the words, he finally said. Mary, before she died, she talked to Lily about me. He stopped, looked out at the fields. I didn't know that. I thought when Mary went, she took the part of me she understood best. Turns out, she gave it to Lily to hold on to. The reporter asked if that changed anything for him. Earl nodded slowly. Changes most things, he said. When you find out somebody who's gone is still looking out for you, still arranged things before she left so you wouldn't be alone, that does something to a man. He started going back to church the following Sunday. The week after that, he showed up at the VFW hall for the first time in 2.5 years. He walked in, sat down at the table where his old friends had been keeping a chair for him without saying so, and didn't say anything about where he'd been. They didn't ask. That's how those rooms work. You show up when you can, and the room is glad you're there. Lily came home for Thanksgiving that year for the first time in 2 years. She had spent the previous one at school. Telling herself it was because of work, knowing it was because the farm without Mary felt like somewhere she wasn't ready to be yet. She and Earl sat on the porch the night before Thanksgiving in the November cold with a blanket over their knees, the way she had sat with Mary in the summers, and he told her things he had never told anyone. About Vietnam. About the mornings there. About the things that followed him home, and the way Mary had known how to stand between him and them, without ever making him feel weak for needing her to. He talked for nearly 2 hours. Lily didn't say much. She just listened the way Mary had taught her to. When he was done, Earl looked out at the dark fields. "I've been planting the same fields for 50 years, he said. "Same land my daddy worked. Same land his daddy cleared." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought about selling it. After Mary. Thought there was no point without her here to see it grow. And now?" Lily said. He looked at her. "Now I think maybe the fields aren't for me to see," he said. "They're for whoever comes after me." He tilted his head slightly in her direction. Same as everything else. In the spring, Earl called Lily and told her he was going to teach her how to run the farm. Not someday. Now, on the weekends she was home. In the summers. Everything she didn't already know from those childhood visits, he was going to show her. The full accounting of it. The real work. The financial records. The seasonal rhythms. The name of every neighbor who bordered the property, and what they expected from a Davenport. Lily drove home that first weekend and stood in the fields with her grandfather at 6 in the morning. And he taught her things that had been passed down for 3 generations. And she understood, standing there in the Georgia spring, that this was what he had tried to say when the buzzer cut him off. Chores your grandfather passes down. The land. The knowledge. The practice of showing up. Steve Harvey reached out to the family 4 months after the episode aired. He had been following the Davenports quietly. He had people send him updates on families who had moved him. When he heard about Earl going back to church, back to the VFW, back to the fields with Lily at his side, he asked if he could call. He spoke to Earl for 40 minutes. He told him that the moment in that studio had stayed with him, that he thought about it in the mornings sometimes, when he was getting ready to host, that it had reminded him of his own grandfather, a man who had never quite known, at the end, how much he was still loved. Earl listened. Then he said, "You gave my granddaughter the microphone." Steve said, "She didn't need it. She was going to say it with or without me." Earl said, "That's what I mean." Steve Harvey featured the Davenport story in a segment on his talk show that aired on Veterans Day. Earl was not present. He had told Lily flat out that he was done with television studios and that one time was enough to last him the rest of his life. But Lily spoke on the show, and she brought with her a photograph, Earl and Mary on the farm porch, sometime in the late 1980s, young and strong and squinting into the sun together. She held it up for the camera. "This is who he is," she said. "This is who he always will be, not the man who got quiet after she died, the man who built something that lasted, the man who came back." Steve Harvey looked at the photograph for a long time. "What made him come back?" he asked. Lily smiled. "My grandmother arranged it," she said. "From wherever she is." She left instructions. On the 1-year anniversary of the taping, Lily drove out to the farm on a Tuesday morning. Earl was already in the fields when she arrived, up before the sun, the way he had always been, the way his father had been before him. She walked out to where he was working, and stood beside him for a while without saying anything. The Georgia fields were coming up green. The air was cool. A hawk was working the tree line to the north. Earl looked at her sideways. "You going to watch or you going to work?" he said. Lily picked up a tool from the row behind them. "I'm going to work," she said. Earl nodded, turned back to the field. And they worked. Side by side, in the early morning quiet of the land that 4 generations of Davenports had tended. An old man and his granddaughter did the thing that had always held the family together. The thing that could not be replicated on a game show, or captured in a viral clip, or fully explained to anyone who hadn't felt the particular piece of it. They showed up. Together, on an ordinary morning, without anyone watching. That is what Lily had been trying to tell him from across a television studio. That is what he had, in the end, come back to believe. Earl Davenport was not past tense. He had never been past tense. He was present, stubbornly essentially, irreplaceably present, in the life of every person who loved him. He just needed someone to say it loud enough that even a proud man with his back turned couldn't help but hear it. And on a Thursday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, under the lights of a game show studio built for entertainment, a 19-year-old girl with her grandmother's voice and her grandfather's stubbornness said it loud enough, and Earl Davenport turned around and came home.